Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam, and in today's video I want to go very deeply into the topic of the ground of being and how the ground of being is that which holds the space for existence to be. It sounds like a very philosophical or esoteric topic. As you will see, it's actually very practical, and it is both the principle, the way, and the result of any spiritual practice that we do. So that whenever we are doing our sadhana or cultivation practices, both the method used and the result that is expected is to clarify the ground of existence, which is pure being. And that's what we want to come in touch with. Now, this is a very elusive concept, especially for the mind, and I want to explain this by analogy, as I often try to do, so that we grasp why the mind sees pure being as the lamest thing that there could possibly be. So you can imagine pure being as something like the number 0, and you can imagine existence as all the integers or all the other numbers. And therefore existence seems to be the more interesting thing, right? Like the 3s and the 4s and the 7s, all these cool numbers all doing their thing and having real value, right? And when we are identified with our existence, in other words, we are identified with the content of our mind and our egoic personality, pure being seems to be the number 0 when it sits to the left of all the other numbers. So say that you have a number, let's make up a number, 417, for example. Now, if I add a 0 at the start of that number, 0417, the 0 has added nothing. So to existence, being seems totally useless. It seems empty of any meaning, empty of any value. It doesn't add anything whatsoever. And yet, if we turn things around and we place the 0 to the right of 417, all of a sudden we have 4,170. So the 0 has multiplied the value of 417 by an order of magnitude, by 10 all of a sudden. And it's the same with being. When being is seen to be the ground and the source on top of which existence expresses itself, all of a sudden it props existence up to a completely different level. And it is seen very clearly that pure being is of infinite value. Because the fact of the matter is we can add endless zeros to the right. And therefore it becomes this source of infinite value that can be then conveyed to existence. So you can imagine, once again in the analogy, if we started to add zeros to the right of 417, then the value of what we have in our hands becomes infinitely high. So just like the number 0, pure being seems to add nothing, and yet when it is recognized as the ground on which existence plays and takes all these cool shapes, then all of a sudden we are onto something, because we acquired the ability to add infinite value and infinite meaning to all the forms and shapes that we see in existence, including things around us, but also including, and very importantly, our own personality, our own thoughts and emotions. As our spiritual development progresses, we come to realize that we have always been the 0 point, or the 0 integer. And that everything that was all these other numbers, all these 2s and all these 8s or whatever, were simply playful forms that were coming and going without ever affecting or having any effect or any lasting effect or any real self to the zero that we are. So all the other numbers have no real being in and of themselves. They are just forms that go up and down, whereas the zero is the source of pure being, or is the actual fact of being, on top of which forms come and go. And as I said, the more we engage in spiritual practice, we little by little start to convey less selfhood to things in existence, and we come to realize ourselves more and more clearly over time as the 0 point or the source from which things stem. Another analogy that you could use for this, which I was thinking about the other day, speaking of stemming, is the stem and the fruit, right? So if you are identified with your egoic sense of self and the contents of your mind, then say that you consider yourself to be the apple, right? You consider yourself to be the fruit. And as the fruit, you think you're really cool because you have this colorful skin, you have a sweet taste, you have a texture, right? And you have all these cool attributes that are very tangible and seemingly very tasty. And as the fruit, you would look at the stem, which is this, brown little sticky thing that is just, on top. You would look at it as the most uninteresting thing that you could think of, right? Compared to you, the fruit that has color and flavor and texture and all these things, the stem seems like the most uninteresting thing that you can think of. And yet, it is not known to you as a colorful fruit that the stem is your very base, is that from which you are growing, is that which tethers you to the tree of, in this case, pure being. So once again, the stem seems uninteresting from the perspective of the fruit, but from the perspective of the tree, which is pure being, the stem is that which gives rise to the fruit, so that the fruit is the expression of the tree. Why is all of this interesting and important? Well, the reason is that so long as you consider yourself to be either the fruit with all its characteristics or all the numbers other than zero, so the ones and the nines and the eights, whatever, so long as you consider yourself to be those fluctuations, you are playing on the level of effect. You are playing on the level of result. And on that level, you can only create friction and push and pull on things, and through enormous amount of effort, try to get your way. So that as a fruit, you would try to be rounder, more colorful, sweeter, and all those kind of things. And you're going to try to create that almost out of whole cloth, because you're dealing with very limited resources on that level. As numbers, you would try to be really high numbers, right? Everybody wants to be closer to the 9 than to the 1, for example. Whereas if you find your existential legs, which is the pure fact of being, which seems to be empty, seems to add nothing, right? It's the 0. By adding zeros, it doesn't matter if you're a 1 or a 9. By adding a 0, you can overtake the integers by many orders of magnitude. You have now become the source from which those integers derive their value. And the same goes for the fruit, right? If you act as the stem and then realize yourself as the pure tree of being, so you trace yourself back into pure beingness, whatever happens on the level of the fruit seems far less important, far less destabilizing, and you are not trying to negotiate your way on the level of effect. You are not trying to, what you've essentially done when you tap into this flavor of pure beingness, which is a non-flavor, it's a no thing and yet cannot be denied, it's the 0, then you are at the level of cause. So you want to realize through sadhana that everything that is on the level of the fruit or the numbers or the personality, in the case of the ego, is only an effect, and you don't want to play on the level of effect. You are very disempowered on that level. You are stripped of any real agency because agency is at the level of cause, and being trumps existence every single time. So to make that jump, to make that meta jump into pure being, we need to develop the ability to get a taste for the raw or bare fact of being or beingness, which to the mind, this is also important, seems utterly useless. But the mind is, as we said, the numbers or the fruit or the effect. So it doesn't really matter what the mind thinks about the lame fact of pure being. Let it think that it's boring. It's totally fine. It's the very mind that we're trying to disidentify from that will say these things. And the more you rest in pure beingness, the more you start to realize yourself as the source and authority of your own reality or your own universe, if you want to call it that. And as that source and as that authority, you don't need the permission of existence. You don't need to negotiate with effects, right? The owner of the circus doesn't negotiate with the animals. It's beside the point. It's completely beside the point. But that can only be done when you realize yourself as the owner of the circus. In other words, the source of existence. And therefore, the entire process of spiritual maturation and self-cultivation is one in which your neurology, your psychology, your psychosomatics are clean enough so that their fluctuation doesn't distract you from the already present fact that you are nothing but pure beingness that has the capacity to know. And in that realization lies the entire trick of suddenly becoming a creator or being at the source or at the cause level of the situation as opposed to as the effect. Without spiritual maturation and cleaning out your psychology and your hang-ups and things of this kind, it's very difficult for that clarity of being at the cause as opposed to at the effect to arise. It's very, very difficult. It's not to say that it can't be done, but the mind has no reason to let go unless that ground is found. So what you're trying to create is enough reason for the mind to relinquish its claim to power. You are trying to give your egoic identity a reason to surrender itself to something that feels far more reassuring. Unless you present the mind with that reassurance of pure being, which holds it and grounds it, the mind is very unlikely to let go. It has no real reason to do so. It's trying to protect you from annihilation, essentially. So you want to come to realize the bare fact of your beingness, the undeniable fact of your beingness, so that your existence as a mental object relinquishes its claim to your identity. This is very similar also to work that you do sometimes in martial arts. Unless you find your ground, unless you find your energetic and factual connection to the floor and to the ground via your feet, it's very unlikely that you will relinquish certain tensions that you hold in your arms and around your hips and stuff like that. You're essentially bracing yourself. You are trying not to fall. You're trying not to fall apart. And finding your existential ground, which is your pure being, allows your personhood and your existence to finally relax because it knows that it cannot be annihilated. There's something else behind it that is holding it all together. And coming to realize that is, of course, the value of spiritual practice. And, of course, your pure beingness is already a fact. But you need to feel it in your bones. It needs to be remembered and realized for it to have any value. In other words, the zero needs to move to the right-hand side to have any value in your life. And the purpose of spiritual progress or process is to move the zero from the left to the right, to come to realize that that zero actually does have a value, and in fact it has infinite value for you, so that your beingness, even though it does nothing, it provides a ground which is undeniable and can then be that which, or on top of which, your existence can finally surrender, relax, and enjoy, and become something else altogether. So that's today's video. I'm very curious to hear your take on the topic and see if you have experienced yourself as that source. and what you think are the barriers for this to take place on a more ongoing basis, on a more solid basis. And as usual, if you think that these videos are beneficial to others, then your liking, sharing, and subscribing makes the channel far more visible, and it makes me also very enthusiastic about this. And I'll be back with more videos as usual. Thanks for listening. Cheerio. Have a good weekend.